I reminded me of getting stuck. I had a very, very brief stint as Northern Ireland football correspondent for the Sunday Times for an autumn, and I went to Latvia covering Northern Ireland over there one time. And long story short, anyway, I was trying to avoid not having a conversation with anybody on the way back because there was a fairly hardcore group now went over and back on the flight to Dublin. But anyway, this fella started chatting to me in the departure gate, and it got to the point where I couldn't avoid not speaking anymore. Where are you from? You know, and I said if I'm going down with the colours flying. I said, from Cork. And he said, what are you doing here? So I made up some stuff about why I was in Latvia. And he said, he loved Cork anyway. He was fantastic. This guy now was covered in tats. And I had seen him changing his Ranger shirt into a normal shirt as I was getting to the departure desk and all this. Anyway, we were getting on he was a drummer as well. He was a drummer he was somebody Shankill, a drummer in an orange band. Anyway, we were getting on and they were striking up the Billy Boys as I was getting on the plane, right? And I was halfway down the aisle and about up to my knees in Fenian blood when I hear a voice behind me. It's my man from the Shankill. He says, will you shut up? This boy's from Cork. Total silence. It all stopped. And what it reminded me of, not equating the two necessarily, but just this idea, it's laddish. A lot of it is rooted in a certain thing, but a lot of it is laddish, right? And all it needed on that bus was someone, an adult, to say, lads, keep it down, lads, just keep it down. Take it easy, we'll be through.
But there were lots of adults on that bus.
That's my point.
It doesn't seem as though anyone actually did.
That's my point. You have a group, I mean, Auchnacloy itself, the whole of Tyrone went through its own horrendous troubles during the Troubles. There was enough people on that bus who would have lived through the worst of it to kind of have a sense of what we're about here. And there was a lot of arguments during the week when it did come out that, well, look at, it's GAA Black Tans, it's a spoof song anyway, number one.
We all had a great laugh when it was on Alan Partridge.
And number two, why are we defending the Orange Order here? And you're going, well, okay, hang on a second now. The Orange Order, by its very nature, is a sectarian organisation, right? But GAA should hold itself to a higher standard, straight off.
Yeah.
And GAA individuals, and I say this as someone who's living in Cork, not in the borderlands, but I would say as someone who's interested in GAA that I would like to think that GAA individuals all over the country would hold themselves to a higher standard and have awareness of what's going on. And like Declan's piece is excellent in that regard in terms of just explaining the connections, the amount of Protestants that actually play with Auchnacloy or with Ahalú O'Neill's as the local club, and what that's meant to everybody. And even he kind of explains how the Orange March went through and how they agreed not to go until after Mass was over, and they actually waited until the parish priest came out and gave them the nod to come down the street. I mean, that's like, life is about shared spaces, like, and this is what it's all about.
But I think what it does, and without wanting to extrapolate, too much from an incident, which is basically like a few lads on a bus and one band on a street and in one town in a country, it shows that for all the work and the hard, painstaking work over the last couple of decades and outreach programs and community activity, it's still so fragile, and all these symbols are still so full of meaning for people. And and we see it still on the streets, and we see it still in the concern everybody has about the greater process and the risks that putting up a border again would have, and the symbolism of all that, and how it could all go up in flames again. And we see bonfires. I mean, just that sort of like really regressive. Just it feels like Dark Ages stuff. Watching it, that it's still there. That you can still have. The sight of an orange band marching will still make a few lads, and maybe it's laddism, and it's it's a bit of crack, and it's more for the comedy of it, or the kind of like, oh geez, I can't believe, we've all been in those sort of situations, but it's still a situation where we're going to retaliate to that sort of, that symbol of what they are with something what we are. And it's a small thing, and it's a bit of crack, and somebody phones and it becomes a bigger story, but it's still a little reminder of how far it needs to go.
And that's the context is very important, because we live in a world in general now where people will excuse anything if it fits in their preordained thinking. We see people who in civilized societies now who will defend everything, horrendous stuff, because it fits in what they're thinking. Mickey Hart and Tyrone came out and said, shouldn't have happened, we're sorry. If that happened in a lot more different areas in life, we'd all be a lot better off. Handled brilliantly. And it's put to bed and you move on.
Well, all I'd say is it's a damn shame that someone didn't say that on Saturday night on the bus.
Yeah, well, at the time,
That's neither here nor there, I suppose, But like it is, I mean, that, and perception in general anyway is a fairly dangerous form of reality. But in Northern Ireland, it's exceptionally dangerous. It's actually it can be life-threateningly dangerous, like in certain circumstances. It's a difficult one. It's a difficult one for them. But I mean, you know, the reality of this is what goes on in Auchnacloy in terms of the Orange Order having their march, in terms of guys playing football with Ahalou O'Neills, regardless whether they're Catholic, Protestant, whatever the hell. That's reality. Like, that's real life. You know, that's actually. That's living, you know. All the politics and the stuff we're talking about is fine, and it has to be addressed. But what's going on in Auchnacloy should be remembered and admired and supported and you know. And I think that's why Declan's piece was very important during the week.
Well, even the individual he talks about, the Protestant individual who's playing for the local GAA team, who's obviously been getting it from the other side, going, "What are you doing going down there with them lads?" And he's obviously for years gone, "Oh no, it's a very open place, they're very welcoming, anybody can come down," and then he's getting his message bombarded with phones going, "Told you so, told you."
Yeah. You know, a lot of it in these things, you know, you do have to get your head around, like, these things are all symbols, and it's like the flags and the controversies around that. Like, how do you deal with the whole issue of Orange marching, or, you know, the presence of GAA clubs, which the unionist community say that they are, you know, overtly, they're the sporting wing of, you know, Irish republicanism, and we've the issue with some clubs being named after, you know, so Republican martyrs, etc. in the north, and that being provocative. Like, do you say you can't do that anymore, or do you try and diffuse them and say, I mean, I think what they're obviously trying to do in Auchnacloy is okay, you're still going to have these things, these cultural phenomena, but you're going to try and not diffuse them of meaning, but change their meaning, or try and make it mean something else. And, you know, because if you're going to tell somebody you can't do that, you can't march, you know, down that street anymore, no, that's done, forget it, you can't do it anymore because it's bad, people are just going to go, excuse me, and that's going to, you know, so, you know, that's a whole...
Well, it's a massive thing.
Tough thing to do, but
I've always thought that the GAA is primarily about games, and even more so now in the 21st century than even the 20th century, it's about games, right? So for me, personally, if they took down tricolours and if they stopped playing the anthem before matches, I would be delighted.
Yeah.
I'm hugely in favour of that. And I understand that it's a source of important identity to people, and it means an awful lot to people to have anthems and to have flags, but I don't want them. I'm quite happy without them. It's about the game. It's about going to see a match. It's not about. I mean, to me, it's not out of tune, but we wouldn't miss it if they weren't there, and it might mean a lot to somebody else to not have them there.
I'm sure you probably get people texting in saying, you know, the Gaelic Games is wrapped up in my sense of Irishness and that sort of thing.
I have to respect that too.
So that's something. But it's like the GAA taking part in the Pride parades, in that it was a decision that we are going to, you know, associate with this, with something which is about inclusiveness. It's sending out a positive message in terms of, you know, somewhere where the GAA can go and actually do something very positive in terms of bringing people in or into the family. You know, what could they do on that front? Would it take, you know, would they make a big gesture, you know, on that front? It's like if we were ever to have an All Ireland soccer team, what would be the big gesture that the South would have to make, or, you know?
Yeah, and it's more like the flag and the anthem is the big one. But you mentioned the very names of some of the clubs, especially in the north, which are named after people who the other community would not have any affection for. Do you go that deep? And maybe you do have to go that deep to just expunge all kind of not cultural, but historical and potentially divisive issues between people. I mean, you know, if you have a club in a town in the north, and the name of the club is a Republican figure, for want of a better phrase, how will that ever not be seen by the other community as a barrier to them getting involved?
Yeah.
So there's lots of these little issues that are pockmarked all over it, and because you say, Tommy, when we think of flags in the north, immediately I think of the Union Jack over Belfast City Hall or something, or the Orange Parades, but it is on both sides, and it's a very, very complicated thing to do.
Yeah, we got to wrap this Saturday panel. Unfortunately, we're pretty much out of time. Who's that Cork lad? Some sense he's talking there. He should be in politics. Dear God.
Brendan O'Brien is his name.